Hey!
I'm not doing anything wrong.
Step aside. Hands visible, now.
I'm standing right here, no threats.
You think I don't see you? I said move!
You're making a mistake. I'm with the federal task force.
The first insult lands before the sirens fade. A flashlight beam slices through the dark, catching a man's boots, his frayed coat, the plastic bag at his feet. The officer's voice is sharp, practiced, already certain of who this man is supposed to be. What he doesn't know, what no one here knows yet, is that the person being humiliated on the sidewalk carries a federal badge in his pocket. And tonight, authority is about to testify against itself. Stories like this aren't just about one officer or one encounter. They're about systems, instincts, and consequences we all inherit. If you believe power should be questioned and truth should be documented, stay with this story to the end. The patrol car rolls slowly, tires whispering over cracked asphalt, the kind that never quite gets repaired because no one important complains about it. It's just after midnight, the hour when business is close but suspicion stays awake. A liquor store sign hums overhead, half-lit, casting a sickly blue glow onto the sidewalk. The body camera's already on policy requires activation at the start of any citizen contact, long before voices rise or hands move. The officer sees him before he means to. A figure near the bus stop. Still. Alone. Too still. A long coat that doesn't fit the season. A backpack slumped against the bench. A plastic grocery bag at his feet. The mental checklist completes itself in seconds, faster than thought feels like thinking. Transient. Possible vagrant. Possible loitering. Possible narcotics. Nothing concrete. Enough to stop. The cruiser door opens with a hollow thud. The street feels larger outside, emptier. The officer adjusts his duty belt habit drilled in during field training, then lifts the flashlight. The beam finds boots first. Worn leather dusted with salt and grime. It climbs, uninvited, up frayed denim, the coat, the man's face. Hey, you can't sleep here. The voice is firm, not loud. Command presence. That's what the academy called it. The man looks up, slowly, blinks against the light. His face is calm in a way that doesn't match the setting. No flinch, no apology, just awareness. I'm not sleeping, he says. The officer doesn't respond right away. Silence can establish control. He learned that during his second month on patrol, when a senior officer told him, if you talk first, you give something away. The flashlight stays trained on the man's chest now, badge-less, numberless. Just fabric. What's your name? The officer asks. There's no legal requirement to provide it. Not here. Not without reasonable suspicion. The policy manual spells that out clearly, right next to the section on consensual encounters. But policies and instincts don't always agree, especially at night. The man pauses, not defiant. Measuring. Why do you need it? The question lands wrong. The officer's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. He steps closer, boot scraping. The camera angle dips slightly as his posture shifts forward. Because I'm asking, he says. And you're loitering. Loitering. A word with a long history and a flexible spine. The city ordinance defines it vaguely remaining in one place without apparent purpose. Apparent to whom is never clarified. The man glances toward the empty street, the closed shops, the darkened windows. I'm waiting for the bus, he says. Schedule says it's late. The officer exhales through his nose. He's heard this before. He's heard it 100 times, maybe more. Waiting becomes an excuse. Calm becomes attitude. And attitude in the unwritten rules of policing often becomes threat. Stand up, the officer says. The man doesn't move right away. Not because he won't, because he's processing. He rises slowly, hands visible, movements deliberate enough to be almost instructional. The flashlight shakes for a second, then steadies. You got anything on you I need to know about? The officer asks. No. The man replies. Any weapons? No. The officer circles half a step, angling for a better view, maintaining reactionary distance, just like training dictated 6 to 8 feet, bladed stance. The man smells faintly of rain and old fabric, not alcohol, not sweat. Something cleaner than expected. Why are you really here? The officer asks, and there it is, the shift. The question isn't procedural anymore. It's personal. The man meets his eyes. For the first time, something like restraint flickers across his face. Not fear. Not anger. control. I told you, he says quietly. I'm waiting. A car passes at the far end of the block, headlights sweeping briefly across the scene, then gone. The officer feels the familiar irritation rise, the sense that he's being tested in his own jurisdiction, on his own street. He doesn't know yet that this encounter is already documented beyond his department, beyond this city. He only knows that he feels challenged, and in policing, that feeling has a way of dictating what comes next. The flashlight lifts again. Turn around, the officer says, hands behind your back. The night seems to hold its breath. The command hangs in the air longer than it should. Turn around. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. The man stands there beneath the buzzing streetlight, shoulders squared, hands still visible at his sides. The pause is small, but in policing, pauses are dangerous things. They get interpreted, they get filled. The officer's hand drifts closer to his holster, not touching, hovering. A gesture drilled deep into muscle memory during scenario training, where hesitation is always framed as risk. The body cam captures the subtle, shifty angle of the wrist, the tightening. Forearm details supervisors will later slow down frame by frame. I'm not resisting, the man says calmly, almost gently, as if narrating for someone else. But I haven't done anything illegal. His voice doesn't rise. That's what unsettles the officer most. People usually protest louder. They plead. They explain. Calm, in this context, feels calculated. Like confidence. Like someone who thinks they know the rules better than the person enforcing them. Turn. Around. Each word lands separately now. The man exhales and complies, slow and deliberate. He turns, interlaces his fingers behind his back. Exactly as instructed. His posture is upright, not slouched, not submissive. The officer steps in, close enough that the camera catches the sound of fabric shifting, breath moving. Spread your feet. The man does. Gravel crunches under his boots. The officer begins a pat down, methodical, at first shoulders, arms, waistband. Standard Terry frisk procedure. The law allows it when an officer can articulate reasonable suspicion that a subject may be armed and dangerous. That articulation will come later. Right now, it exists only as instinct. What's in the bag? The officer asks, nodding toward the plastic grocery sack. Food. The man replies. Like what? Sandwich. Apple water. The officer doesn't answer. He reaches down, opens the bag without asking. Inside, exactly what was described. No contraband, no surprises. The flashlight lingers anyway, as if expecting something to appear if stared at long enough. You always carry yourself like this? The officer asks. Like what? Like you're smarter than the situation. The man almost smiles. Almost. It fades before it forms. I carry myself like someone who's been stopped before, he says. That lands harder than an insult would have. The officer straightens slightly. Irritation sharpening into something closer to offense. He steps back, reassessing not the man's threat level but his posture, his tone, his refusal to shrink. You got ID? The officer asks. I'm not required to provide it, the man says. No edge, just fact. The officer nods once, slow. He knows that's technically true. He also knows that technically true and practically enforced are not always the same thing. The academy never said that part out loud. It didn't have to. So you're homeless, the officer says, not as a question. The man doesn't answer right away. Traffic noise hums faintly somewhere beyond the block. The streetlight flickers. I'm between places, he says finally. The officer lets out a short breath, a sound halfway between a laugh and a scoff. Figures, that word carries more weight than it should. It settles into the space between them, heavy with implication. Training talks about bias as something external, something to be managed, but bias doesn't announce itself. It slides into assumptions. It disguises itself as experience. The officer radios in a status check, voice clipped and professional, conducting a field interview. One male, standby. The dispatcher acknowledges. Time is logged. A record begins to form. The man remains still, compliant, silent now. His eyes scan not nervously, but observantly. He notes the patrol unit number, the officer's name stitched above the pocket, the cadence of the radio traffic, details collected without obvious effort. The officer doesn't notice that part. What he notices is the lack of submission, the refusal to become smaller. And somewhere beneath the uniform, beneath the authority, a quiet thought takes root. Why isn't this guy afraid? The question bothers him more than any threat ever could. The street feels colder now, not in temperature, something else, a tightening. The kind that creeps in when certainty begins to crack. The officer stands a step back, Radio still clipped to his shoulder, listening to nothing in particular. Dispatch hasn't said anything new. No warrants yet, no alerts. Just open air and time stretching thin. He watches the man's reflection in the cruiser window, how steady he is, how still. Most people shift when they're being detained. Weight changes foot to foot. Hands flex. Fear leaks out in small, uncontrollable movements. This man doesn't leak. You sure you don't want to make this easier? The officer asks. The words are casual, almost friendly, but the meaning underneath is sharp. Cooperation, in this context, doesn't mean compliance anymore. It means surrendering narrative control. I'm making it easier, the man replies. I'm standing where you told me to stand. The officer exhales, looks up at the flickering streetlight like it might offer guidance. Then he makes a decision, not dramatic, not loud, just another step deeper. Turn back around, he says. Face me. The man does, slowly. Their eyes meet again. The flashlight lowers slightly now, no longer needed. The officer studies the face in front of him, searching for something he missed. Earlier, a tell, a crack, a reason this interaction feels off script. You talk like you've done this before, the officer says, like you know procedure. The man considers the statement. For the first time, his gaze drops not in submission but calculation. His hands move, carefully, toward the inside pocket of his coat. Stop, the officer snaps. I'm going to show you something, the man says immediately. Calm, clear. I'm reaching slowly. The officer's hand snaps fully to his holster now. Thumb near the release. Training takes over. The body cam captures the shift in breathing, the subtle shake in the lens. Do not reach, the officer says. Louder now. Hands where I can see them. The man freezes, then nods once. Understood, he says. I'll tell you what it is then. Silence stretches. The street seems to lean in. There's a badge in my inner pocket, the man says. Federal. The word lands wrong. Not loud. Not explosive. Just wrong, like a note out of key. The officer lets out a short, involuntary laugh. Yeah, he says. And I'm the mayor. The man doesn't react, doesn't flinch, doesn't rise to it. I'm assigned to this district, he continues. Undercover? Joint task force? I'm not armed. I've been observing activity along this corridor for 3 weeks. The officer stares at him. The radio crackles faintly, as if to remind them both the world still exists beyond this moment. Hands up, the officer says. His voice has changed now, tighter, less certain. The man complies, slowly raises his hands, then uses 2 fingers to slide a leather wallet from his pocket, careful to keep movements visible. He holds it out. May I? He asks. The officer hesitates. Every instinct screams no. Every rulebook screams verify. He nods once. The wallet opens. A badge catches the light, not flashy, not dramatic. Worn. Familiar in a way that can't be faked easily. The lettering is clean. The seal unmistakable. The officer's mouth opens, closes. He looks at the badge, then back at the man's face, then again, as if one might change. This, he stops, swallows. This some kind of joke? No, the man says. This is exactly what it looks like. The weight of the moment settles slowly, like dust after a collapse. Authority doesn't vanish. It inverts. The officer feels it immediately, the ground shifting under his feet. The realization that every word, every assumption, every tone has been preserved. Somewhere, deep beneath the uniform, something gives way. Not anger, not fear. Recognition. The room where consequences begin doesn't look like a courtroom. There's no gavel, no raised bench, just a long table, beige walls, and a monitor mounted a little too high, forcing everyone to tilt their head upward. The kind of room designed to feel administrative, neutral like accountability, should be painless if it's wrapped in fluorescent light. The footage starts without ceremony. Timestamp in the corner, unit number. Location coordinates. The first frames show asphalt rolling beneath headlights, the slow crawl of a patrol car through a block most residents avoid after dark. No one speaks at first, not the lieutenant at the head of the table. Not the internal affairs sergeant with a legal pad already half full. Not the officer himself, sitting rigid, hands folded, uniform pressed like armor. The voice comes through the speakers, his voice, familiar and suddenly distant. Hey, you can't sleep here. The room doesn't react, but the officer feels it anyway, the tightening in his chest. The sensation of watching a version of himself he no longer controls. The camera shakes slightly as the cruiser door opens. A small thing. It gets noted. Everything gets noted. They watch the flashlight linger. Too long. They hear the pause after the man asks why his name is needed. The lieutenant shifts in his chair when the word loitering is used. City ordinance flashes briefly on a printed page in front of him. Vague language. Broad discretion. Illegal gray area departments rely on more than they admit. The footage continues. Stand up. The pat down. The grocery bag opened without consent. The scoff quiet. Almost casual but unmistakable once it's isolated and replayed. The officer's jaw tightens as his own tone plays back to him, stripped of context, stripped of intent. Just sound. Just posture. Just record. Internal affairs. Pauses the video. Why did you escalate here? The sergeant asks, not unkindly. The officer clears his throat. Based on training and experience, he says. The phrase comes automatically. He said it before. It usually works. Experience with what? The lieutenant asks. The question hangs longer than any silence on the street ever did. They resume playback. The moment when the man mentions prior stops, the officer's response, the word figures. It echoes in the small room, louder now than it was that night. The reveal plays next. The badge. The pause. The shift in breathing. Someone rewinds it, frame by frame. The instant authority changes hands without a word being spoken. No one comments. They don't need to. Policy manuals sit open on the table. Use of authority guidelines. Bias-free policing directives updated just last year, after a federal consent decree threatened funding. The language is clear, even if enforcement hasn't always been. The undercover agent's written statement is read aloud. Factual, controlled. No accusations, just observation. Tone. Sequence. Impact. He maintained compliance throughout. The sergeant reads, "At no point did I present a threat." The officer stares at the table. He wants to explain the feeling, the instinct, the pattern recognition that training rewards. But feelings don't translate well into policy violations. Instinct doesn't hold up under slow motion. Public affairs has already called. The footage was flagged automatically the moment the badge appeared. Federal involvement triggers mandatory review. A request has come in from the city manager's office. A reminder from legal. This will likely go external. The lieutenant finally speaks. This isn't about one stop, he says. It's about how authority sounds when it thinks no one important is listening. The officer nods, barely. The words land with a weight that feels heavier than suspension ever could. Outside the room, the world is already reacting. Edits are being made. Headlines drafted. But inside, time moves differently. Slower, methodical, unforgiving. The screen goes dark. No one says it yet, but everyone knows this footage won't stay in this room. And once it leaves, it won't belong to any of them anymore. By the time the decision becomes official, the story has already escaped its original shape. It's no longer just a stop on a quiet block or a body cam clip reviewed under fluorescent lights. It's a briefing memo forwarded to the city council. A late-night meeting between the police chief and the mayor's legal advisor. A call from the Department of Justice reminding everyone politely that federal eyes are paying attention now. The discipline letter arrives on a Tuesday morning. Administrative language, clean margins, no emotion. The officer reads it alone in his car, parked outside the precinct. Engine off. Suspension without pay. Mandatory retraining. A formal reprimand placed permanently in his file. Not termination, but not nothing. Enough to follow him for the rest of his career, wherever it goes next. He doesn't feel anger first. He feels exposed. Authority had always felt solid before, backed by policy, uniform, repetition, but now it feels conditional, fragile, dependent on how it looks when slowed down and played back without intention to soften it. He realizes, with a dull ache, that he never expected to hear his own voice the way others did. Across town, the undercover agent files his final report. It's concise, objective. He omits the insults that didn't need to be written down to be understood. He doesn't request punishment. That isn't his role. His role was observation, verification, letting systems reveal themselves when they think they're unobserved. The task force disbands quietly weeks later, its findings folded into a larger federal assessment of stop and frisk patterns in the city. Numbers matter there. Ratios. Disparities. The agent's encounter becomes a data point not because of who he is, but because of how he was treated before that was known. That detail echoes louder than any reveal ever could. The department announces changes at a press conference that feels rehearsed but necessary. Updated bias interruption protocols. Revised language in the conduct manual. Requirement: officers articulate specific, observable behavior before initiating detentions in designated discretion-heavy zones. The chief speaks carefully, acknowledging harm without naming individuals, accountability without spectacle. Some call it progress, others call it damage control. Inside the precinct, reactions split quietly. A few officers shake their heads, muttering about bad luck, about how anyone could have made that mistake. Others say nothing at all, watching their own body cams a little more closely during night shifts, hearing their own tone for the first time. The officer returns to duty months later. Same badge, same car, but something is missing. Not confidence, something harder to define. Certainty, maybe. The assumption that control automatically equates to correctness. He finds himself pausing more often now, asking questions he used to skip, feeling the weight of every word before it leaves his mouth. It doesn't feel like redemption. It feels like restraint. Once, late into a shift, he drives past the same bus stop. The streetlight has been fixed. The liquor store sign no longer flickers. The block looks ordinary in a way it never did before. He doesn't stop. He keeps driving, eyes forward. The silence inside the car louder than the radio. Elsewhere, the undercover agent walks the same city without a badge in his pocket now. He blends back into crowds easily. That's always been his skill. But the memory lingers, not as trauma, not as victory, as confirmation. Confirmation that authority reveals itself not under threat, but under comfort. When it believes it is unseen. When it believes the person in front of it doesn't matter. The footage still circulates online, though interest fades the way it always does. New clips replace old ones, new outrage, new algorithms, but the policy regimes remain. The training modules remain. Quiet, structural things that don't trend but alter trajectories all the same. Justice, in the end, doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives with paperwork, with procedures rewritten, with officers learning slowly that power isn't measured by compliance but by restraint. That dignity isn't granted by authority, it's revealed by how authority behaves when it thinks it doesn't have to try. The man at the bus stop was never just a test. He was a mirror, and for one moment, held steady under a streetlight, the system saw itself clearly enough to flinch.